Let's test cheap vs expensive knee pads. An expensive one! Very cool. Let's test cheap vs expensive chisels. And cheap one! Very cool. Let's test cheap vs expensive fluffy rollers. An expensive one! Very cool. Let's test cheap vs expensive shop vac. Starting with a dry suction test, we can see that expensive gets to work quicker. Now onto our blow test, where interestingly cheap seems to push more air. Continuing its win streak, cheap does better on our agility test as it's slightly lighter. We can confirm expensive has a higher suction with our weighted lift test. Expensive's also a fair bit quieter. And finally on our liquid suction test, we can see expensive works quicker. Expensive wins. Very cool. Let's test cheap vs expensive shin pads. Starting with a comfortability check, we can see that cheap has more surface area. This correlates with our slippage test, where expensive moves around more. Moving on to a wine glass break test, and we can see that expensive breaks and cheap doesn't. Again confirming this, where cheap feels a lot less painful when struck by a hammer. And finally we can see cheap transfers less energy. So cheap wins. Very cool.